Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event.
You know, every year around December, Washington does this massive, frantic dance. It's like the Super Bowl of bureaucracy. I'm talking, of course, about the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. It's the bill that keeps the lights on at the Pentagon.
And usually, by the time it passes, everyone is just so relieved it's done that they pop the champagne and go home for the holidays. They focus on the big number, the top line. Look, we spent $900-something billion.
Exactly. It's all about the total price tag. But I was reading through the post-game analysis on Federal News Network regarding the 2026 NDAA, and honestly, I'm not looking at what passed. I'm fascinated by what got cut. Because the stuff they dropped, that feels like the ghost of innovation past.
That's where the real story is. The cutting room floor of the NDAA is basically a graveyard for good ideas that were just too scary for the status quo. And this year, for the 2026 cycle, the reforms that were stripped out, well, they tell a pretty worrying story about our ability to actually modernize.
It's frustrating, right? Because we hear the same buzzwords every year. Agility, speed, innovation. But when the rubber meets the road, or I guess when the ink meets the bill, the mechanisms to actually do those things disappear. Let's dive into the specifics. What was the biggest casualty this year?
Without a doubt, it was the aggressive push for commercial first acquisition mandates.
Commercial first. Okay, break that down. That sounds like something we've been trying to do since the 90 seconds.
We have. The idea is simple. If a company in Silicon Valley or Austin already makes a piece of software or a drone that works perfectly well, the Pentagon should just buy it. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't spend 5 years building a military version that costs 10 times as much. The House version of the bill had some teeth in it clauses that would have effectively forced program managers to prove why they couldn't use a commercial solution before starting a new development program.
Like a prove it or lose it kind of deal?
Exactly. It shifted the burden of proof. Instead of saying, "Can we buy commercial?" the default would be, "You must buy commercial unless you have a really, really good excuse."
And that got dropped?
Completely gutted in the conference committee.
Why? Who looks at that and says, "No, I'd rather wait 7 years for a worse product"?
It's not that simple. It's about control and risk. The arguments against it usually come from the traditional acquisition core. They say, commercial tech isn't rugged enough, or we can't control the supply chain, or, and this is the big one, if we buy their product, we don't own the data rights. So, the Senate and the DoD establishment pushed back, arguing that a hard mandate removes their discretion.
Discretion. That's a polite word for, I want to keep doing things the way I've always done them.
It is. But think about the signal this sends to the market. You have all these venture-backed startups building incredible defense tech, AI, autonomy, cyber tools. They're watching Congress. They see this mandate get dropped and they think, okay, the door isn't actually open. They're still going to favour the giant prime contractors who know how to navigate the paperwork.
It reinforces the valley of death, that gap where startups die waiting for a contract.
Precisely. And speaking of dying in the waiting room, the second major reform that got dropped was the expansion of the flexible funding pilots.
Oh, I saw this. This is the colour of money issue, right?
Right. For listeners who aren't deep in the weeds, the Pentagon budgets money in specific buckets. You have a bucket for research, a bucket for buying things, procurement, and a bucket for operations. And you generally cannot move a dollar from one bucket to another without an act of Congress.
Which makes sense for buying an aircraft carrier. You research it, you build it, you operate it. linear.
Perfect for ships, terrible for software. Software is never done. You're researching, building, and operating it all at the same time every single day. If you have to wait 2 years to move money from research to operations, just to update an app, the app is obsolete before you deploy it.
So the 2026 NDAA was supposed to fix this.
There was a proposal to significantly expand a pilot program that treats software money as one big pool, single appropriation. It allows program managers to move fast. If the code needs fixing, they fix it. They don't have to call a lawyer to see if they're spending the wrong color of money.
And they killed it?
They didn't just kill the expansion, they actually narrowed the scope of some existing authorities. The argument was oversight. Congress hates losing the ability to line-item veto specific things. If they give the DoD a big pot of flexible money, they feel they lose control over exactly what is being bought.
This drives me crazy. It's like a parent refusing to give their kid a debit card for college because they want to approve every single pizza purchase, but then wondering why the kid is starving.
That's a great analogy. And the cost of that control is speed. We are competing against adversaries who do not have these color of money problems. They see a capability, they fund it, they field it. Meanwhile, we are arguing about which accounting code to use for a software patch.
It feels like we're prioritizing the process of buying over the outcome of the purchase.
That is the fundamental philosophical flaw of the American defense acquisition system. We would rather have a failed program that followed all the rules than a successful program that broke a few. The 2026 NDAA dropped reforms confirm that the immune system of the bureaucracy is still incredibly strong. It rejected the transplant.
Let's talk about the workforce aspect. I recall seeing something about training or empowering contracting officers that didn't make the final cut.
Yes. There was a provision aimed at creating a specialized career track for digital acquisition officers. Basically, people who actually understand code, cloud computing, and AI, and giving them the warrant to sign contracts.
Because right now, you might have a brilliant contracting officer who knows the Federal Acquisition Regulation, FAR, inside and out, but thinks Python is a snake.
Exactly. And when that person writes a contract for an AI system, they write it like they're buying a tank. They ask for requirements to be locked down 5 years in advance. The reform was meant to build a cadre of experts who speak the language of Silicon Valley.
And that was dropped? Why? That seems so low risk.
It was seen as duplicative. The response was, we already have training programs. We already have the Defense Acquisition University. It's a refusal to admit that the current training is insufficient for the digital age. It's organizational arrogance.
So, we have no mandate to buy commercial, we have rigid money that can't move, and we aren't creating a specialized workforce to understand the new tech. It feels like we just hit copy and paste on 1985.
In many ways, yes, but I want to point out something subtle that also got left out, something the Federal News Network article touched on, the data rights issue regarding intellectual property.
Oh, the IP wars. This is always the sticking point.
It is. The House wanted to clarify that if the government pays for the development of a technology, they get the technical data package. But if a company developed it privately, the government can't strong-arm them into handing over their trade secrets just to get the contract.
That sounds reasonable. If I build a better mousetrap with my own money, you can buy the mousetrap, but you don't get the blueprints.
But the DoD loves blueprints. They want to be able to fix the mousetrap themselves, or hire a cheaper company to make the mousetrap next year. The reform to protect commercial IP was watered down significantly.
which again scares away the best companies. Apple isn't going to sell iPhones to the army if the army demands the source code for iOS.
Precisely. And so the army ends up buying a government phone that costs $5,000 and runs like a brick.
It's a vicious cycle. Listening to this, I'm struck by a thought. We talk about acquisition reform like it's this dry, technical thing. But isn't it really a question of national survival?
I don't think that's an exaggeration. Look at the geopolitical landscape. Technology is moving at an exponential curve. Our acquisition system moves at a linear bureaucratic pace. The gap between those two lines is where we lose the next war.
That's terrifying.
It should be. When we drop these reforms from the NDAA, we aren't just deleting text from a PDF. We are choosing comfort over competitiveness. We are choosing to keep the auditors happy rather than keeping the soldiers equipped with the best tools.
Is there any silver lining here, or are we just doomed to repeat this loop?
The silver lining is that the ideas aren't dead. The fact that they made it into the House bill or the Senate draft means there are champions on the Hill who get it. There are people fighting this fight.
But they lost this round.
They lost this round. But acquisition reform is a game of inches. 10 years ago, we didn't even have other transaction authorities, OTAs, being used the way they are now. We have made progress. It's painfully slow.
It's evolution, not revolution. But we might need a revolution.
We absolutely need a revolution. But the system is designed to prevent revolutions. It's designed for stability. The tragedy of the 2026 NDAA is that it proved, once again, that Congress is more afraid of wasting money than they are of wasting time. And in modern warfare, time is the only resource you can't get back.
That's a heavy realization. We focus so much on the waste of taxpayer dollars, which is valid. Nobody wants $500 hammers, but the waste of time isn't a line item on a spreadsheet.
No, it's not. But the cost is paid eventually. It's paid in capability gaps. It's paid when a conflict starts and we realize our supply chains are too rigid to surge production, or our software is vulnerable because we couldn't patch it fast enough.
So, looking forward to 2027, what happens? Do these dropped reforms come back?
They always come back. They'll be repackaged. Maybe they'll be smaller pilots. The commercial first advocates will try again. The software funding people will try to find a new angle. But until there is a massive external shock, a real crisis that forces the system to break its own rules, we are likely going to see this incrementalism continue.
It's like we're waiting for a crisis to give us permission to be efficient.
That is the history of American defense reform. We are reactive, not proactive.
Well, on that cheerful note, it really does put the celebration of the NDAA passing into perspective. Sure, the government didn't shut down and the troops are getting paid, which is vital, but the engine under the hood is still sputtering.
The engine is running, but it's a V8 from 1,970 trying to race a Tesla. We kept the engine running for another year. That's the victory. But we didn't upgrade the car.
A V8 trying to race a Tesla. That's the image I'm going to be left with.
It's the reality we have to deal with.
Well, for everyone listening, next time you see a headline about the defense bill passing and all the billions of dollars involved, take a moment to wonder about what wasn't in there. Because sometimes the silence, the dropped clauses, the deleted sections speaks louder than the final text.
Absolutely. The future was on the table and we swept it onto the floor.
Thanks for breaking this down with me. It's complex stuff, but it matters.
Always a pleasure.
And to our listeners, keep watching the fine print. We'll catch you next time.
A special thank you to MarketUS.com for furnishing us this information. You can reach them at MarketUS.com or call them at 954-636-3232. Before we go, this deep dive was created by the MarketUS.com team. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. It's right below the subscribe link.